Hello and welcome to tonight's screencast, revision screencast, looking at global sporting events. So what we've got to do then is the last part of the kind of year one or the old AS specification. So we've got to have a look at them. We've got to have a look at the modern Olympic Games. And before we do that, we have to have a look at as a concept, we've got to look at the background and aims, okay, of the modern Olympic Games. We've got to have a look at, we know the Olympic Games started 1896 in Athens. What we've got to understand is, how did it get here? What were the kind of influences that allowed this modern kind of global phenomenon in terms of the Olympic Games start? So we'll have a look at kind of the background and then the aims of the kind of modern Olympic Games. On top of that, we'll have a look at the political exploitation of the Olympic Games. So once the Olympic Games became this global kind of event, it was then used by governments and as a political tool. So they use it to, it was obviously used to exploit I suppose kind of influence over different countries by hosting these games, and they use it as like a kind of a vehicle to do that. So we'll have a look at the key Olympics here: the Berlin 1936, the Third Reich ideology. Then we've got the Mexico City Black Power, Munich 1972, Palestinian terrorism. Then we've got Moscow 1980, the boycott led by the USA, and then we have the flip, which is Los Angeles 1984, boycott by Soviet Union. Okay, so these two are directly related to each other. So what we'll have a look then. If we go through, let's have a look first of all, background of the modern Olympic Games. So what we've got to do then, before we even go into this, we've got to have an understanding of who was the key figure in the growth of what we now know as the modern Olympic Games. And this key figure was actually called Baron de Coubertin. He's a French aristocrat, extremely rich man who had a vision, and he wanted to unite the world through sport. And what better way, in his opinion, to do this was by the modern Olympics. So in order to do this, he needed some really key influences. Okay, so I mean, on top of this, he wanted to unite the world. He wanted to create this concept of international understanding because, at the time of kind of wars, kind of international unrest, he wanted to find this kind of vision, have this kind of concept, this kind of event that kind of brought people together. So in order to do this, the number one focus, well, not the number one focus, if I start here, the first one was actually the ancient Olympic Games in Greece. So basically this was the ancient Olympic Games. There's kind of lots of stories about this that kind of influenced him. But then, he couldn't go and visit those, obviously, because it was in ancient times. What he could do is actually go and visit people in England. So what we had is these kind of regional versions of kind of like village games. So you had the Cotswold Olympic Games, which was the first one. So this took place in the Cotswolds, and what would happen, it'd be lots of like kind of a village kind of events, so there'd be kind of lots of local type activities, things like welly wanging, pig catching, ridiculous things really, but these kind of hammer throwing, these things were in this kind of games. On top of that, he also went to the Much Wenlock Games. Dr. Penny Brooks, who organised this, and this was a kind of Much Wenlock, not actually far from here, in Worcester that is, so we're looking here, Much Wenlock Games. He went to visit this, which is another one which really was really impressed with the organisation of this and how he got the community in Much Wenlock to actually kind of get along with each other. On top of that, he went to visit the 19th century English public schools, and in particular, he went to visit Dr. Thomas Arnold in Rugby School. And this then allowed, obviously, he was really interested in the character building idea behind Thomas Arnold's muscular Christianity ethos. So you can see there, you've got these kind of key things. Do you need to know masses about these? Absolutely not. What you need to know is there was 4 key influences with regard to kind of the creation of the modern Olympic Games. So this then, after doing this, he went away and kind of thought about kind of how he was going to put this into a kind of a worldwide Olympics, and that happened. So the formation of the first modern Olympic Games was in 1896. So basically in 1896, and it was based around the one in ancient Greece, but actually took place in Athens. So if we went from here, the key focus then here, what were the key aims of the modern Olympic Games? Well, they were things such as fair play, taking part, character development, role models, international understanding. These were the key things that he was looking to create, and they were the kind of key focuses there. So ultimately, if you get a question asked you on the background of the modern Olympic Games, you've got to know who and you've got to know where. On top of that, you've got to know the formation when it started, 1896. That's a mistake there. It was based on ancient Greece, but it was in Athens, was the first games. And then on top of that, there were key aims associated with the Olympics. So you see here, background, aims. Now, when you're trying to remember this, okay, I've kind of said to you, the triggers you should be using is as follows. So if I go over to here, you'd be thinking, memory. Firstly, if you see background and aims of Model Olympic Games, the first thing you've got to do is say, right, who? Who was responsible? What was his day? See if you can do that now. On top of that, where is it there were influences? And what you need to know is those influences, you need to know where they came from. So if I said to you, influences came from, can you use the came, the first letter on that, to try then to remember what they were? Going on. Led to the formation of led to the formation of the modern Olympic Games. What was the date and where was it? Not ancient Greece. On top of that, you've got aims. Can you pick 3 out of those aims to try and help you out there? Okay, so see what you can do. All right, there's the answers, and you can see if you can kind of how good you were with regard to that. Now, that is the background and the aims of the modern Olympic Games. Now, what we've got to do is have a look at the next section, which is looking at how the Olympic Games was used as a vehicle for political exploitation. So let's have a look at the different ones you have to know for the specification. So starting off there, first Olympic Games we have to know about is Berlin, 1936. Okay, and how was it exploited? Well, this was when Hitler was in power, so the Nazi party were actually using the Olympics as a stage of political propaganda, the Third Reich ideology, kind of German supremacy. And basically what this meant was, and this really went against Jesse Owens, who was a black American athlete, and basically won 3 medals. But due to the fact it was really focusing on this political propaganda, kind of going against equality, really, kind of being a very racist kind of way of doing things, he was very, very disappointed that Jesse Owens, like I said, who was a black USA athlete or African American, and Hitler refused to give them the medal. Okay, so he would not personally give the medal to him because of this kind of political propaganda they were attempting, and he thought, of course, that it was going to be white German athletes who were going to win everything, but that didn't quite turn out that way. So going on then, you've got Mexico 1938. So Mexico 1938, this was used to the political exploitation at this one then was actually the Black Power, okay, demonstration, where 2 black athletes, Tommy Smith and John Carlos, have said there, basically due to the appalling conditions for black athletes in the USA, they kind of used the kind of ceremony as a kind of a Black Power demonstration. So this led to them both being suspended from the games, and they were asked to then leave. So straight away, so they took it back to America. So that's one example there. So we've got Berlin, Third Reich ideology, political propaganda, going against, of course, Jesse Owens went against that propaganda, and Hitler did not like that, refused to give them the medals. Black Power, 2 black athletes, Tommy Smith, make sure you can get an understanding. They used the ceremony as a way to protest the lack of civil rights. Next one then, Munich 1972. So back to Germany this time. And this one was the Black September. So basically terrorists, and they're called the Black September terrorists, and what they did is 8 Palestinians entered the Olympic Village the day before the games began and seized athletes from their kind of nemesis, the Israeli Olympic team, and it was kind of a power play to say that the Palestinians were reigned supremacy over kind of the Israeli country, but they used it again because it was a global event. They used the Olympics to kind of showcase their supremacy. Moscow then, 1980. So what we have there, the Moscow 1980 Olympic Games, it's a big, big situation, the Cold War time, Russia versus, the Soviet Union back then, versus the USA. So what you had then, Moscow 1980, what this meant was the Olympics were boycotted by the USA team. So basically this was due to the fact that the Soviet Union had invaded Afghanistan. So what happened was the USA said, we are not going to Moscow, we don't agree with it. It's not something that we want to be involved in. So then, of course, your next Olympics, Los Angeles 1984. You might remember some of that from our kind of gender information in the 20th century. Sorry, the first time a female ran in an Olympic Games marathon. You might remember that due to the 1975 Sex Discrimination Act. But what we're interested in, how it's used as a political exploitation. So in this case, what we had was Soviet Union payback time. So they boycotted the Olympics, the LA Olympics, 12 weeks before its opening ceremony, and they cited the reason as a lack of security. So That would be the key reason they gave, but of course it was a bit of payback to the USA for boycotting their own Olympics. So what you're going to have to try and do then is try and get yourself in a position. If I put it on now and said, right, that is the order of these. If I said to you now, that is what you've got to do, you can pause the screencast, have a think about it, make your notes. On top of this, you might then have a look at this. If this came up, if you put these down here, how many of these could you do? Could you have a go at mixing and matching? Maybe pause the screencast now. Okay, just make a kind of go down, make your kind of arrows. Where do you think they go to? And then after that, maybe we could have a look at this now, see if you got it right. Okay, so you've then got these onto here. So that'll just be a little tester activity to do, just to check and see if you're okay with that. Okay, make sure you got your notes right. Make sure you got lots of practice on kind of making sure the right Olympic Games are linked to the right exploitation. And of course, we can have a good go at looking at the background and aims of the modern Olympic Games. Okay, thank you.